BQ Press. We are welcoming you to another Sunday morning with B Cubed. We have got with us, oh wow, it's all good. I have a little note that shows up every now and then here as we get used to this new system. So, what we've got here with us this morning is Dale Ivan Smith. He is author of the Empowered series, a 5-book series set in a semi-alternate history. Did you say Richard Nixon was president during the Cuban Missile Crisis?
I did, yes.
So they're horror as well. And well, we'll get back and let you tell us about that. But we've also got with us Phyllis Irene Radford of Radford Editorial, who is does editing on that and drinks from a really cool coffee mug.
My dragon cup. And on the back it says, "Here there be dragons."
You gotta love it. It's kind of cool. And you've been busy too. You've got your what's your latest Wildwood series?
Outcasts of the Wildwood.
Outcast. Now
that's the sequel to Walk the Wild with Me, which is really a sideways look at the Outlaws of Sherwood Robin Hood myths.
And I can endorse that, and because if I say nothing about a book, it's because I either haven't read it or I haven't, or I was like, yeah, okay. And by the way, I haven't read yours yet, Dale.
Do.
I will. But I can endorse the Wildwoods because I thought Phil did a fantastic job on those characters, and I've been waiting patiently for time to read the second book here, so it's something to look forward to. But Dale, you are the star of the hour. You are here to tell us about the Empowered book. So why don't you just give us a rundown of what it's all about?
Yeah, one of my author friends described the Empowered after she beta read the first couple of books as superpowered urban fantasy. It's really kind of a crossover series. It has science fiction elements along with fantasy. The basic premise is that there is a Gaia, the global sort of consciousness of the Earth, which has a certain level of energy, which is not detectable by normal science. And that puts it really into the realm of fantasy in my book, but I would ram with it. And ages ago, it was prevalent in the world, and that's where ancient gods came from. And then a system was devised by the ancients to kind of contain Gaia because it was causing all kinds of problems. And that lasted until just after World War II, when we started detonating nuclear weapons. And that kind of unleashed the Gaia energy and the first round of Empowered, which, you might call superheroes and supervillains. But and in 1962, in September rather than October, there was a Cuban Missile Crisis that went hot. Richard Nixon had won the narrow 1960 election and was president. And Empowered helped him. Yeah, Empowered helped him stop. They helped prevent the war from spreading more widely than Europe. Basically, Germany and European Russia and parts of the East, China in particular, were hit. It's a real tragedy, but the perspective of the series is from the U.S. and it's set in the present time of the 21st century. So there's the Empowered themselves essentially are a very small number of humans, numbered in the thousands. And if you become empowered, typically as a teenager, although it can happen later in life, you are expected to join the Hero Council, which is a global organization, sanctioned heroes, superheroes that wear the blue jumpsuit with the logo. If you choose not to, you essentially have to be nullified. You wear a tracking bracelet. You've agreed to never use your power, and you're monitored for the rest of your life. And so the other option, which isn't a sanctioned option, of course, is to go rogue. My main character became empowered at 16. Both her parents were killed when she was very young, and she has two twin sisters that were babies when her parents died. and she's raised by her grandmother. Anyway, she becomes empowered just before her 16th birthday, and decides to not report it, and ends up finding a group of rogue empowered in Portland, or they kind of find her actually, and that's in the prequel. But that leads to her eventually, when that group's found out a short while later, she's sent to special corrections, which is where empowered rogues are sent, and you're given a choice. I mean, you're not given a choice at all. She was given the option to parole, I should say, because she was brought in as a teen. So at 21, she was paroled, with the stipulation that she never use her power again. But of course, she's trying to protect her sisters who've gotten involved with some criminal types, and has to use her power. And then this organization called Support, which is kind of the NSA meets the Men in Black, that supports the Hero Council, pick her up and say, okay, either work for us or go back to prison for life. It's your choice. And
Well,
that's the setup for the series.
This sounds like an incredibly timely and interesting series. If I may be so bold, whatever happened to Nixon?
Oh, you'll love this, Bob. After he was president, he became Supreme Court Justice, and the chief of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice. So there's actually a plaza, or if I remember correctly, I think it's a plaza in Portland named after him. So
I'm sorry, we're having technical difficulties. Nail on this one.
Yeah, I'm making the hard choices because I'm not a Nixon fan at all. I'm in the same camp as you, but I wanted to do an alternate history, and I was telling you before the show that I see this as kind of a background alternate history. It's not a Harry Turtledove where, the master of alternate history, where it's right up in front all the time. This is in the background. It's the world the character grew up in. And yeah, I agree with the comment. Yes, but the main thing is that the Hero Council isn't what it seems. They're the good guys, air quotes. So she's tasked with infiltrating the world's most notorious supervillain organization called the Scourge. Some people pronounce it Scourge, but I say Scourge. And she has to infiltrate them and join a cell and to figure out what their plot is. That's the arc for book one. And the thing she'll get out of this is that Support will help her family. Her grandmother is very ill, and they'll help fund her treatment for a very rare disease. So there's a 5-book arc, and the character starts out, Matilda starts out very angry to begin with. So funny story. It was actually before Phil got involved with it. I was working with Mary Rosenblum, who was my development editor and friend. I'd taken a one-on-one class with her years earlier, and she helped me. I ran the outline for the series by her, and we had a lot of back and forth, and it was great. But in May of 2016, I was finishing a really intensive voice edit that Mary had put me on the first book to make sure the voice was right. And I was listening to a podcast, and there was an author mentioned who had written a superhero series about a young superhero who was a criminal and had to go become a hero. And I thought, this sounds like mine. And in fact, the character had the same first name as my character, which at the time was Jolene. So I ended up having to change my name. Now, I actually read the first part of that book later, and it wasn't that similar to mine. There was a lot of differences. Her series was much more 4-color superheroes with all wear elaborate costumes, and in my series, the superheroes sometimes have names or handles, but in general, that's considered old-fashioned. Certainly by Matilda, or Matt, she goes, my main character. She regards that as very old-fashioned.
So let me get this right, Dale. In the first 2 books, you had Mary Rosenblum before her untimely death.
Yeah.
And then you found Phil of Radford Editorial to come in and steer you through the next 3 books. So, Phil, my question for you. What's it like working with a guy who wears funny hats?
Well, have you seen my collection of tiaras? Actually, I've known Dale for a very long time. I think I met you first through the writer workshops at Oricon. But I've known your wife, Leanne, for even longer through the Portland Lace Society. And whereas in retirement, she has continued to make lace and expand her knowledge and skills and does amazing work. I've let mine go. I just simply don't have time to sit and create the ultimate dot to dot picture. And I would love to still make lace, but it's just not part of my agenda anymore. But anyway, I've known both Dale and Leanne for a very long time. And I really felt honored when he asked me to look at, was it book 3 I started
Book
with?
3. Yeah, Empowered Outlaw.
Yeah, because I also knew and respected Mary Rosenblum. And it was, to pick up her legacy was, like I said, it was an honor. She was an amazing editor developer. She could grasp the whole world,
yeah,
and keep it in her head and point out inconsistencies and either make you explain them or make them fit. And so, come jumping in kind of in the middle. But, she had taught Dale well. And reading the 3rd book as my only introduction to this world, I knew what the world was about. And I didn't, I wanted a little bit more introduction of characters as they came in because they had been fully developed in 2 previous volumes. But there wasn't a lot more that I needed for him to clarify. There were little things, little inconsistencies. They creep into everybody's work. The one thing I do remember, don't ask me why it stuck in my head so much, was that you had a character drink, just straight down an entire bottle of water without swallowing until the end. And I'm going, no. I have delayed swallow as response. And I would be choking and gagging and unable to breathe before I got a third of the way through the bottle.
Yeah,
and so I, that little nitpicky stuff was finally what I, ended with. And I was kind of sorry to see the series end. But at the same time, the characters came to a good conclusion. They had nowhere else to go. So unless he picks up on some of the side characters that were interesting, but not fully developed yet, I don't see a need to continue that series.
I was just remembering too that actually Empowered Outlaw wasn't the first book you edited for me. I'd forgotten that you'd actually come in and copy edited and gave me some story edit as well on a book called Spice Crimes about 6 months earlier.
Yeah.
I was under a very tight timeline. That was a book that was essentially a tie-in novel to another author's series, Lindsay Broker's Fallen Empires, 8-book series. And Amazon at the time had a program called Kindle Worlds, which was essentially a kind of place to license and do tie-ins and spin-offs from public established authors' books. And so I liked her series a lot. So I wrote this standalone novel that takes her characters at the end of the 8-book series, and she has another adventure. And Phil came in very short notice and very short time frame, along with my wife, who also gave me a copy edit. And the two of them really made the book better. I think Phil probably saw this too, but my wife noticed that the doctor character in that space opera was missing for 80 pages. And so then the margin notes were, what happened to this character? Where is this character? So a more egregious example of the water bottle problem.
Yeah. But that's a sign that you do your characters right. If people miss them, even if they're side one-liners, if you draw them well enough. And Dick Francis, mystery writer, is also really good at this, where, I remember he described one guy Really a non-entity. He needed it to be in some scenes because of his job, but we don't really get to know him. He described him as the guy who wore ties that looked like every meal he'd ever eaten had been spilled on that tie. And instantly, anytime he introduced that character as walking into a scene, it was the guy with a weird tie, or the guy with the dirty tie, and we instantly knew who he was talking about. And you've done some of that too, where you can pick up on a trait and tag the character with that trait to make him memorable, even when we don't need him, on scene. So, yeah, I enjoyed working with Dale, and he does a lot of, I missed that, but he also does some really good stuff, and I've enjoyed working with him.
I enjoy working with Phil. She's really helped a lot, and like I said earlier, she's going to help me with a new project coming up. But yeah, she also helped me with my urban fantasy Gremlin Night, and then a tie-in novella that came out last year.
Mhm.
That again, very short notice, but helped
Yeah,
quite a
but
lot.
that wasn't as short notice as Bob's phone call at 8:30 this morning.
No.
But Bob takes advantage of me a lot.
The speaking of God, that just threw my train of thought right out the window. I oh, anyway, proceed. Oh yeah, somebody's telling us they remember that Dick Francis character, but yeah, Phil on short notice is remarkable. I mean, with Phil's help, BQ Press put out its first anthology in 100 days. From
That
call,
is a story in itself.
Yeah.
from call to publication, and bestseller #1, by the way, #1.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Uh, it was all fun. So tell me this, guys, what's next?
Okay, it's your show, Dale.
All right. Well, after publishing Empowered Hero, and this is May of 2020, so it's in the pandemic, and I'm stressed out and everything. I started thinking about trying a different genre because I've been a longtime mystery reader, and I worked at the library before retiring in December 2019 for 32 years, and I had thought about writing a library mystery. So an idea came to me, and I developed it and worked on a first draft. Jumping to a new genre, even one you've read for a long time but you haven't written in, is not a quick process for me. I mean, it took me years to learn how to write a science fiction or fantasy novel that worked. So I really kind of had to remind myself not to expect to be able to learn how to write a mystery novel in 3 months or 6 months. So it's been a bit of a process, but I have a draft now that I'm revising. I'm going to run by Phil. That's cozy library mystery series set in the mid 1980s, March 1985. So it's kind of a near historical cozy, and it's called A Shush Before Dying. And the first of the Meg Booker library mysteries. It's interesting. I realized after creating the character and working on the book, that she has the same initials as my hero from Howard, but they're quite different.
Mhm. Yeah.
She's not angry like Matt at all. She's just a very different character. But it just worked out that she's actually named after for the character Meg from A Wrinkle in Time. So my favorite novel as a kid.
Yeah. And when I reach my comfort books are cozy mysteries. I read them all the time. Hello, kitty cat. And I have now written 4 of my own. There are rules to be classified as a cozy, or even a cozy paranormal. And I try not to cross into the paranormal too much in my mysteries. Although I do a little bit more explicitly in the most recent one, which is Ghostly Whistles. Came out last Halloween for obvious reasons. And just, that I chose a series that I can take on indefinitely if I so choose. But each one is mostly self-contained, which is one of the rules of cozy mysteries. So they're fun, but like Dale said, they're not easy. They're easy to read, but they're not easy to write.
So now, is there like a cozy mystery council that will send you a nasty email if you get it wrong?
No, but you'll get angry letters from your readers.
Yeah.
And there's a very tightly knit group of readers that just glom on to everyone that comes across the book stands. And if you don't conform to their expectations, you'll hear about it.
So it's kind of like writing romance, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. When I belonged to RWA, I quickly learned that I wasn't writing romance. But the F word of romance was very much format or formula. There is a formula to writing certain types of books, but the authors say, no, 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 never use that word. Each one is unique. Yeah, right. It's like every television show is unique, but you can set your watch by the plot points and the commercial breaks.
Say it ain't so.
Oh yeah, and they say, well, what about House? House is different. And I says, yeah, but every show opened with House is bored, House is taking too many pills. The first commercial break, and then we see the patient and their unique problem. At the first commercial break, 20 minutes into the hour show, they present House with this unique diagnostic problem, and he puts away his pills. And then at the next commercial break, he is at a standstill. He's done every test he can imagine. At the third commercial break, somebody says something totally out of context, and you can see the light in House's eyes. And the last 10 minutes of the show, he figures it out and deals with it. Every single show follows that formula. It's more obvious in series television than it is in books, but it is there in books.
A comment that I got from author and editor Laura Ann Gilman about romance and mystery is they are essentially built around a structure, whereas science and fantasy is more of a format that can include those structures but doesn't have to. And it really stuck with me when I heard her say that. And yeah,
Laura Ann's pretty good at what she does. So when Laura Ann speaks, people listen.
Yeah, she's one of the best editors I've ever worked with. And I like to consider her a friend, even though because pandemic, age, health, whatever, we don't see each other anywhere near enough anymore.
She wears green bathrobes, you wear blue. Those two just won't mix.
Well, that's what you get when you call me at 8:30 in the morning and ask me to be on your show.
Well, I did get to see her at Rainforest at the beginning of the writers' retreat. At the beginning of the month, we were in the same session, so we had a couple of meals together and saw each other. And she's doing well. So,
which session were you in?
Session 2. That's the one I usually go to. So,
I'm a session 1 person myself.
I thought about switching up sessions, but we'll see.
Well, I do the session 1 because I get there a week early, and that way I get my cabin. Where I'm at, I do the laundromat, and it lets me get some work done. Phil can appreciate that. Phil and I wrote a book together called The Lost Enforcer. It did actually pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm still waiting for you to clean up the manuscript that was badly edited, so we can.
I beg to differ.
Well, I mean, yeah, it was very well edited by Sue Bolish. God, I miss her. But it was badly produced. Let's put it that way.
Oh, one could maybe say that. Actually, I've got it, the first one pretty well done. It's
Okay.
getting the second one because Phil and I write together. And so I will
Mhm.
just remind her that we wanted to have the second one finished before we republished the first one. We bought
Yeah.
our rights back, and all of a sudden now we're faced with the trauma of a book that's set in the 80s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
God, when did I meet you? It was like 2003
oh,
when you had your first amateur draft written.
amateur?
Well, I mean,
Like, I like to think
what
the book
did
drafts were fantastic creations.
it was a great story. But as far as the text goes, I think the opening line is the only sentence that remained intact.
Yeah, I
And I wanted to change that, but that's okay.
for a thousandth of a second, electrons froze in their orbits. Actually, what I could have said was their vibratory patterns at some point around the nucleus. But yeah, the it was a fun book,
Mhm.
and we did have one of the finest editors that ever lived, Sue Bolish,
She was wonderful.
and she turned it
Another person we lost too soon.
too soon. As she told us, she says, "Bob, this is a great book or a good airplane book. It's kind of book would be great just to get on an airplane, read, and to leave on the seat." Said, but it's got more in it than that. It can be better than that. And she turned it into that better book.
Mhm.
Whenever I've taught people on editing, given workshops on editing, I just can damn near pick a page at random and say, see what Sue did to this page.
Oh,
Wow.
I mean, it was like a 300-page manuscript, and there were 800 comments.
That was the second
Do
round
the
of
math.
800. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, but
Okay. Andrew Lucas just commented, I'm writing a story set in the 80s. Write what you know. I don't remember the 80s. I remember the 60s.
well,
Well, I chose the 80s for my mystery, mid 80s, March 1985, to be precise, for the first book, because I was hired at Multnomah County Library in September or August of 1987, and I liked the 80s. It was a time when you still had the paper card catalog, the great analog computer for database for finding books.
Yeah.
You had dumb terminals, you had coin operated typewriters. It was a different era, and I wanted to set a mystery, at least at the beginning. I have ideas for it perhaps going into the 90s and beyond as the character gets older. But yeah, I agree with Andrew, right? What you know. So
now I know why you like the 80s too, because this is something not everybody knows. You were the backup drummer for Motley Crue. Isn't that correct?
Okay. Andrew J. Lucas says again, the golden age of kids on bikes solving mysteries.
that's right.
Oh, no. Andrew's too young to realize that happened 20 years.
Oh, that was in the 50s.
Yeah, the Boxcar Children.
Yeah.
You had the Dick, what's his name? The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, didn't these people have parents? What do you mean you need something to defuse a bomb with?
Yeah.
Well, I do have one of the supporting characters in the Shush Before Dying. He's a skateboarder. He's the new page at the branch. So he'll help, or perhaps he'll be a danger. It remains to be seen.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, why don't you keep a little mystery in there?
That's right.
So,
Oh, Scooby-Doo.
That's right.
You know,
A favorite of mine.
I had to supervise my son's watching of Scooby-Doo, but he actually preferred Inspector Gadget. So
I never
I'm a
liked
Scooby
Gadget, but then again, yeah, we I have to admit, I think what we like is what we saw first.
Mhm.
And the first time I actually got access to TVs, it was still the Looney Tunes. And you know, I don't know, but I don't think I ever actually got to go to movies that still had the cartoons
Oh,
in in the front of them.
I
Hmm.
did. I did.
Yeah.
I
Well,
saw, I saw Darby O'Gillen, The Little People, in the theater when it first came out.
so wow. So Dale, what was your first movie?
The first movie that I saw that I remember seeing, uh, probably probably a science fiction or horror movie on TV. The first one I saw in the theater, believe it or not, an older neighbor boy took me to when I was 5, was Robinson Crusoe on Mars with the monkey, and I went down to the theater down the street. And then a couple years later, my drive-in experience with my family was seeing a double bill of the Frank Sinatra movie where they take over involves a U-boat, something about a queen, and they take a liner, but that's on a double bill with the Planet of the Apes, which is the film I really remembered.
Hmm.
So I was probably 8 years old at the time, 7 or 8. So yeah,
That's
started out with science early.
yeah, it was Return to the Planet of the Apes was my second movie I ever got to go see.
Uh, that's
Huge. I mean, I came from a background where movies were God's curse upon humanity, and if good Christians didn't go to the movies.
Yeah. I'm currently copy editing a book by Catherine Carr, Kit, and it came out as a historical romance, which it isn't. But it's set. It opens in 1910, and one of the characters becomes very deeply involved in the first motion pictures. And he comes from a fundamentalist background and quite literally is divorced from his family because he's a cameraman
mm.
Oh,
in the
that,
movies.
maybe they. What was that first one about the KKK?
I don't remember.
The old black and white, one of the very first the movies.
Oh, Birth of a Nation. Birth of a Nation.
Yeah.
Well, maybe if they'd have known he was a cameraman for Birth of the Nation, they would have been okay.
Yeah. No, he comes. He's in a smaller studio, and but they do mention that as really the first full length film. Where before that they'd all been 10 minutes, one reel, one reel of film.
Yeah, yeah. It was all fun. Oh.
Yeah, our comments are going on about teens involved in mysteries in the 50s and 60s. And yes, I've read Trixie Belden. I've read Tom Swift. I've read Nancy Drew. I've read the Hardy Boys.
Now I liked Encyclopedia Brown. I think it was his character. He had been broke his leg or something and read an entire set of encyclopedias.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I love that because when I was a kid, the best reading in the house was when we went over to my grandparents' house, and on the bottom shelf was the complete set of encyclopedias, World Book encyclopedias. I think they had the old white and blue cover, and I swear I don't know if I read them cover to cover, but I just read the heck out of those things.
Oh yeah. And when we had an encyclopedia, it was long before the days of the internet and Google. But you could always find something of interest just opening at random. But if you really need research, it had all the references. You could write down a book title and then go to the library and request it. And it it was sort of like an internet link, but no internet. And the library was my home.
But today you can do all your research just by going to papers.com or something like that.
Yeah.
I'd like a paper on pick a topic, and you can get a fully referenced paper, even with typos if you want.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, why
Okay,
they
Bobbsey twins, just been added to the list of children mysteries. So yeah, there's a long history of mystery, something or something mysterious um, in most books. There's always a problem to be solved. And sometimes you know the villains, or the nature of the crime right up front. And sometimes you're halfway through the book before you realize, oh, yeah, there was a dead body back there. Now we're really honing in on what we're doing. Um, and that putting together the puzzle is an important part of plotting any book.
Mm-hmm.
And Dale does it with his Empowered series. And he dribbles clues. It's a sort of like leaf litter in the forest, where there's a lot of it, a lot of detail, but it's the one green leaf here, the next one here, the next one here, that leads you along the same trail that the characters are following. Um, I'm looking forward to seeing your mysteries, to see how you have developed that skill, instead of being a big worldly problem into a small crime problem.
now you're editing his next cozy mystery?
I've been contracted to do so. I
That's
haven't
right.
seen anything yet, but
Now,
I am.
when
Yeah.
You
you've been
should be.
contracted.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah.
that's Radford Editorial. So, in spite of being a best-selling author,
Mhm.
best-selling editor, and a few other things, you also run an editorial business.
Right. And I've recently let the website go. And I don't think I ever got a single client from the
Mm.
website. But I get tons of clients from the Radford Editorial Facebook page. So you can find me on Facebook. It's an open page. I don't post there often enough, but it's there. I am afraid that I just don't think in terms of internet advertising. Um, I've been around too long. So,
Oh,
but anyway, there is a Radford Editorial Facebook page. Um, you can find me on Facebook as Phyllis Irene Radford. I talk about the books I write a lot more than the books I edit. But I do, when my clients finish a book and get it produced, I do try to like their page. And
well, that's not that hard for when you got somebody like Dale. I mean,
yeah,
I listening to you talk. I mean, I sense a very lot of appreciation for the quality of these books. Um,
yeah, yeah. And, I attribute a lot of that to his work in the writer's workshop at Oricon. He organized it for many years and he did a splendid job at that. But he got to read so many of these beginner manuscripts and hear the comments of them,
Mm-hmm.
and learn from other people's mistakes, which I think is a very valuable tool.
that is true. Before I did BQ Press, I ran a writers group for
Mm-hmm.
20 years. And I tell you, nothing prepared me for editing at BQ Press quite as much as, seriously, did you not spell check this before you submitted it to the group? Now you can say, seriously, did you not spell check this before you submitted it to our press? Um, yeah, I actually have a category on our Moksha rating that says block this user.
Mm-hmm.
Phil has pointed out that on occasion we would get what passed for 13-year-old porn.
Mm-hmm. And they'd submit the same story to every anthology.
Oh boy.
Now, so with all that time and effort put into writers' workshops, you ever given any thought to doing editing on your own, Dale?
I really haven't. It's enough for me to get better at writing what I hope is compelling and engaging fiction, novels primarily. It's funny because I've had several short stories published, a number of flash fiction pieces, and a couple of anthology indie anthologies, Street Spells and High Moon. But I find that writing shorter length for me isn't that quicker than writing a novel. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a few months rather than 6 months, but it's not that much quicker because I tend to think long. So
Yeah, condensing a concept down into 5,000 words when you're used to writing 100,000 words
yeah,
for a book was very difficult for me. I was fortunate in that my first books came out from Daw Books, and so it was an automatic invitation to a lot of their anthologies when they were the only major publisher doing anthologies because they don't make any money.
yeah,
I can
And
vouch for that.
yeah, but I was fortunate enough to get some really fine editors on my short fiction and say, okay, Sheila Gilbert says I have to buy this, but I can't buy this until you do this to the book, to the story. So that was really my learning tool in writing short. And then, as some of you know, I'm part of the Bookview Cafe, which is a publishing co-op of established writers. Our membership rules, that they're recently undergone some revision, but when we started, our membership rules were stiffer than that of SIFWA for publication credits. And they got me into editing.
mm,
When we started doing reprint anthologies to make money for the co-op, I was the first one to raise my hand because, one, I wanted to be first to read stories by Vonda K. McIntyre and Ursula K. Le Guin, but also to figure out how to do it. And that, of course, led to the infamous phone call after the inauguration in 2017, January 2017.
mm-hmm.
And this gentleman is going on and on and on about how we needed to do a story about alternative truths. And, and I kept asking, what's the catch? What's the catch? And he went on for about half an hour telling about how great this was going to be and what we needed to do with it. What's the catch? Oh, we're going to put it out by day 100. Reprint anthologies take 6 months to put together.
Yeah.
Original fiction anthologies generally take a year. He wanted to put out an original fiction anthology in 100 days. You don't know how close you came to being shot, Bob. But we were the first. We got it out fast, but we were the first to get one out. And we hit bestseller lists all over the place for a long time.
And Andrew J. Lucas was in that.
Yeah. Yeah. And he's, about half the comments coming up on my side screen are from Andrew. But anyway, that's how I got into anthologies. And I did, the first 3, 4, 5 anthologies for BQ Press. I've done a lot of them for Bookview Cafe. But then I did Alternative Deathiness and I got burned out.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a cheerful topic, though.
I mean, granted, I needed closure from losing a much beloved brother.
Yeah.
And yeah, Andrew, you are chatting on Sunday mornings. We should get you on the show. I needed closure, which is why I proposed that particular anthology. But 658 stories submitted.
But they cheered you up.
And, granted, when you get that many, half of them are gone before you've read the second page, which is still leaving me with over 300 stories that had good things about them. Not all of them were stellar. That's half of that group is gone. That's still 150 good stories that needed to be whittled down to 30.
Well,
And
it could have been worse.
yeah,
You could have been on Apocalypse.
no, I did not. There were reasons why I did not want to edit Alternative Apocalypse or Alternative War.
Now,
Okay.
speaking of, I mean, this isn't. Have you ever hit us up with a submission yet, or is it just because you don't do short there, Dale?
Mostly because I don't do short, but no, I haven't hit you up with a submission. I thought about it a couple of times, but I've been pretty much working in novel land the last several years. I do have an idea. I'm one of the things that impresses me about Phil is not only is she a great editor, but she's also able to work seemingly effortlessly in multiple genres that are fairly different from one another. And so I don't want to give up on science fiction and fantasy. So trying to find a balance with that and mystery is interesting. But I have another series idea, which is a kind of science fiction mystery, and I was thinking about writing a short story as a kind of test run for it. But that's a little different than having an open cult and anthology. You'd have to find an anthology that would actually take that idea.
What's the idea, if you don't mind sharing, or if you do, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm kind of keeping it under wraps right now, but it's a science fiction mystery. That's all I really will say about it at the moment, because it's different enough. I don't really know if it has an audience, to be honest with you, because the kind of science fiction it is. But
yeah, having read, the bulk of the Empowered series, and even some of your other stuff, and you use the female point of view so well. I'm sure your wife Leanne has something to say about that.
oh yeah.
And I think you should look at the upcoming anthology from B Cubed, Madam President.
Mm.
That's all the information you get. Madam President. She can be president of the PTA. She can be president of the world, past, present, future, whatever. But I think you should look at that.
Okay, I will take a look at that.
Yeah.
We were talking about POV, and it's interesting because the Empowered and my urban fantasy Gremlin Night, as well as the novellas that are with the same character Gremlin Night, are both first person POV. Mm-hmm. And going to mystery, I'm writing in a bit more distant third, because with cozies in particular, there's a little bit of narrative distance I've noticed from the character. Whereas when you're working with a first person narrator like Matt or Liz, you're very much in their experience, and you only get to see what they get to see. And that was something Phil was good at keeping me on task with, was making sure that I didn't break the POV, and that it was more showing than telling, sort of thing. But
but actually point of view is something that I had rammed down my throat in the romance world. I never did write a straight romance. They were all my rejections came back. Too much plot, not enough romance. Too many ghosts, not enough romance. Too much of that crazy woo-woo stuff and not enough romance. But I belonged to Romance Writers of America for a long time, simply because they taught me how to write. But they're very strict on point of view. And romances have a bad reputation of the character describing themselves or standing in front of mirrors so they can describe themselves. And, no. You only describe what your character can see. And I had it described to me as a helmet cam. That actually allows you to think about what you're actually seeing. But what that character can see from their helmet cam is all you can talk about. And that character's reaction to what the camera sees. So, yes, Andrew, I've got one for Scott's Planet as well.
Now, well, you're talking about Scott's Planet, an anthology that's on our pending list.
Yeah, that short story was one of the first things of yours that I edited, Bob.
It was the first short story I ever sold.
Mm-hmm.
I and I got a rave review from Harry Turtledove, which made me so happy.
Yeah.
He happened to be in it, and I was had some correspondence with him. I don't remember what it was, but he sent back nice story. I considered that good enough. If Harry Turtledove's going to give me a nice story, I'm going to like it, because Harry Turtledove is one of my favorite authors. I'm actually going to work on getting him on the show, just so I can suck up to him.
Mm-hmm. He is one of the nicest people I have ever met in the science fiction fantasy community.
He's a version of David Gerald.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. They're both really nice.
They are both wonderful people. But back when I was a fairly newbie author with very few credentials, I wrote him a research question, basically, was a character in Celtic Britain. Would they consider themselves a Celt or a Gael? And he wrote back pages quoting Julius Caesar's Chronicles of Britain, which I have now read. And yes, a native of Britain would consider themselves a Briton, not a Celt, but a Briton, not a Gael. Gael was an imposed term from the Romans.
So. You know what I like about Harry? I mean, all his writing is so good, but I think his doctorate is in Byzantine history.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I believe that Western school system, American school system, who pretends that the Roman Empire ceased to exist once the Rome ceased to be the ruler of the empire, left out 1,000 years of history in our education. History that, I mean, we had Alma Alexander.
On that note, I'm going to recommend Alma Alexander's book, Empress, where Justinian and Theodosia are Arthur and Guinevere of the Eastern Mediterranean. And she grew up in this area. She has a strong Serbo-Croatian heritage. And it's a very enlightening book, even though it is science fiction fan. It is alternate history.
I did not know, because I'm going to have to read it, because you remember I really wanted to do. There was a Queen Irene in the the Byzantine Empire, who had a proposal from Charlemagne, and her people killed her to keep her from taking it. And I want to write the book where Charlemagne and Queen Irene do get married, because can you imagine the history of Europe and the world if you had achieved a combination of the Byzantine process and the Holy Roman Empire had come together?
Right.
It would be.
We can go on forever 3 days about that. We need to get back to Dale's book. This is his show today.
Well, Dale, there's one thing you got to understand coming on the show. No topic remains sacrosanct.
As it should be.
Hey, look, Andrew Lucas left us a comment. Let's get that on there before we go back to you, because he got to be in an anthology with David Gerald and Mike Resnick, who qualifies also as the third nicest guy in fantasy and science fiction.
Yes.
So, Dale, we're coming down to the end. Give us the elevator speech for why people need to go buy your 5-book trilogy. You like that?
Series.
Quintology.
Well, The one of the taglines I've used is, some say that superpowers are um, either good or evil, but what if you're both? Right? It's a story about a young woman who rejects the consensus reality that you have to conform and be this kind of person if you have your power and use it for this cause, which, as she learns, is actually subverted for purposes that she discovers later. And she charts her own course, and she has a found family that she creates around her and people that she cares about. And it's about people who are would be regarded as average or just not part of the elite, making a difference and changing the world. And I hope it's a fast-paced, compelling read. I tried to give it a thriller pacing, so I certainly enjoyed writing it. And it's one of those books where it's weird. I don't know if either of you have had this experience. I've never heard any writer talk about it before, but in the last year or so, I've had sort of flashbacks to what it was like writing the series, and remembering writing particular scenes, or just remembering the scenes play out in my head again when I hadn't thought about it for a while. And it was clearly the book's calling. So I'm actually one of the things I'm developing in the background right now is an idea for another series not connected to the Empowered, but that has some of the same vibe and character types, hopefully done better. So we'll see.
Well, Dale, sorry.
That's all right.
Dale, I want to thank you for coming on, and I want to thank Phil for taking the 6:30 phone call.
It was 8:30.
Thank you, Phil.
Is 8:30 the one you answered?
Yeah. Yeah. I have my phone on Do Not Disturb from 10 p.m. to 7:30. So if you called at 6:30, you got no answer.
Well, I know, but I didn't want to have Dale not have the opportunity to have your effervescent present with him, because as I have learned, a book, the author is the soul of a book, but the editor, my God, do not ever sell the imprint of an editor short. Editors imprint themselves on the book, and they make a difference, but they do it from behind the curtain.
Mm-hmm.
A guiding spirit. That's the editor, guiding spirit.
And you can't sell them short. Now,
I tried.
Good news, guys. Next week is Tom Whitmore. Now, Tom Whitmore, we have two regularly scheduled programs that we operate around. One is the last Sunday, where David Gerald and Jim Wright come on the last Sunday of every month and talk over me, ignore me. It's Kevin. No, I mean, when I get those two guys on there, I just am. It's awesome to see and hear them talk and tell the stories of what goes on, because Jim Wright has an almost encyclopedic knowledge of science fiction and fantasy, and he brings with it
Jim Wright or Tom Whitmore?
Jim Wright. Oh. Tom Whitmore has an equally encyclopedic knowledge. I figure if I could get those two guys going, I just turn off the end of the timer, and it would be sometime in around 9 o'clock at night. They're talking about what kind of typewriter Ursula K. Le Guin used. And they would do it in a way that would make us care. They're that good. And so, anyway, Tom Whitmore's on next week with a very special guest that I am not yet at liberty to mention, but it is someone that we will all recognize. Everybody's going to want to tune in, and I will get it to post out as soon as I am released to do so. And in the meanwhile, I would urge you to go out and buy your BQ Press book, buy The Empowered, buy Irene's new book, Not Walk the Wild.
January release is Outcasts of the Wildwood.
Outcasts of the Wildwood. Just a brilliant
Susan McDonald is reading the first book, Walk the Wild with Me. And I've been billing it as an alternate, a different view of Robin Hood. But Walk the Wild is really Little John's story. Outcasts is Robin's story. But then I also have out the Whistling River Lodge Mysteries, which is at the moment it's 4 books. Ghostly Whistles came out in Halloween, which is the 4th book. Just to get to know the characters and have fun. I recommend you start with the first book, Whistling Down the Wind.
They're all good if you like cozy mysteries. Now, Dale.
Dale.
Yeah, Dale, hold up your book so that we can get that last shot of your book. And this is just a brilliant 5-book set based on everything I've heard, because you don't get Mary Rosenblum and Phyllis involved in losing projects. And your art is wonderful. Go ahead.
Thank you. Let me just mention real quick that the ebook of the book 1 of Empowered Agent is available for free. So it's what we indies call perma-free, permanently free. So if you want an easy entry, also the Multnomah County Library does. Last time I checked, they had print copies too of the first 4 books. I need to get the 5th book into print, but
well, you get there and get that done. And that said, B Cube Press likes having you here, and we've enjoyed every moment of it, even you, Andrew. And thank you, Barb. You all take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.